Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today. We had more than 69 participants actually signed up today, so we hope that more people are going to join. My name is Katerina Giering. I'm with the Circular South Africa, and I'm going to speak a bit more about CSA in a second. But I have today with me Kirsten Barnes from Green Cape as well, and Kirsten will also speak today about the difference between circular economy and green economy, because I think there's quite a bit of confusion happening in the sphere. I think the bottom line of all of this is that we do currently need quite a bit of action. So what I'm going to quickly jump to is Circular South Africa. The platform was formed last year, and the vision is to amplify the potential and the value of the just circular economy across South Africa. So the idea is really to draw on the knowledge that we have out there, the partners that are out there, and pull them all together so that we actually are starting to bridge the silos that we are seeing in our country happening. Why we have created the Circular Lunch Club is because I think everyone during COVID was very active on webinars, and what we see now is a bit of a fatigue, but I do think it's quite important to have an ongoing conversation. And that's why we said, okay, in short stunts, we're going to have those conversations being hosted, and also to have an informative, accessible, and an informal discussion. So Kirsten and I are keeping our content quite short, and we hope in that way people can engage actually with different topics and are also inspired to look at other topics. So today's topic is the circular economy and the green economy. What's the difference? And I just want to give you a brief introduction. So hot off the press is the new ISO standard of circular economy. This has been in the making for a few years now. The ISO standard defines the circular economy as an economic system that uses a systemic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by recovering, retaining, or adding to their value while contributing to sustainable development. So again, we see it's very resource focused. We also know that the ISO discussion had quite a bit of lobbyists involved. Academics are still defining circular economy. I think we have now more than 220 definition officially, but I think the idea here is to move on and to jump into action as well. Definitions are important and metrics are obviously important, but we also need to see the traction on the ground. I have taken the green and the circular economy, and I have picked up one of the graphs that I found online actually, and you can see here, and I hope you can see it on the screen. Let me just maybe use the laser pointer, that the circular economy is very much focused, again, waste management and resource efficiency. So we don't even speak about sufficiency, and I will get back to that in a second. So efficiency is making things more sustainable or better with less almost, but it doesn't speak about production itself. And then the green economy speaks to ecosystem resilience and human well-being. However, I do think we can argue that the circular economy is actually quite cross-cutting, and it does speak to ecosystem resilience, and it does need to entail human well-being and centralize human well-being in circularity discussions and initiatives. So as I said, it's only waste and resource focused, the graph that you find online quite a lot. But I do think that the green economy is this overarching idea, and it is a bit of a pitfall because we just might green the current linear economy that we see without really having that systemic change in place. And I've taken another graph that was published a while back, and they have looked at the circular economy butterfly diagram, where you have the technological cycling and the organic cycling, and they have basically put the human sphere as the center. So they have extended that butterfly diagram, and I think this is quite a nice illustration of how we can actually look at the circular economy, especially from a South African perspective, a little bit more around the social component, where we actually really look at individual well-beings and community resilience and belongings as well. So I do think that the green economy is the overarching idea, but the circular economy is looking a little bit on how we can actually reach a regenerative economic system. And obviously, again, we have the 3 pillars that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has put forward, which speaks about eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials, I put in brackets, actually use less, and then also regenerate nature. And I would strongly argue we are forming part of that nature ecosystem. So also us humans are involved in that part of it. And why I'm coming back now to the 10 R letters, some of you might be quite familiar with you. In the beginning, we had 3 Rs, now we actually at 10 Rs. is it starts at around refuse. So prevent raw materials use in the first place. And obviously that is also a contentious topic in a Global South perspective. The Global South still needs to develop quite a bit. So we do also need to use raw materials, but we do also see pockets of overconsumption on our continent, also in South Africa. So sufficiency speaks more about the refuse and the reduce side, and the efficiency speaks more around the redesign, reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture. And I think that is something that we need to really clearly have in front of our eyes and to constantly reflect back on. So for me, circularity is very much around how we actually achieve this regenerative system. And with that further ado, I can hand over to Kirsten, and then we can actually start this open conversation that we are talking about.
Okay, thanks very much, Katerina. If you can just unshare, yeah, perfect. So thanks all. I'm thrilled to be part of this conversation. And as Katerina mentioned, it is an ongoing conversation. So with a huge number of definitions of circular economy and it's used in different ways in different spheres, it means that this is a developing conversation. And what we find in our context, although green is in our name, is Green Cape, we often find green misused. And I think all of you will be familiar in the ways in which that happens. And that's because also, as Katerina referenced, is that green can be used on a largely linear system where you've changed one aspect of it. So maybe you've rationalized your electricity usage and now in your process is using far less electricity, or you're able to support your electricity supply through solar panels, and therefore you can call your process green. But what is not necessarily seen is the whole line of production from raw material extraction. Say you're producing a consumer product, it needs to be packaged in some way and delivered to the consumer. That's looking at one micro aspect of your whole operations to deliver that product to the consumer, and also is not considering a full life cycle or system of all the resources used. What I love about the concept of a circular economy is it literally challenges us to look at the system as a whole. So we can't only look at one aspect of it and then claim we are winning or claim greening, but we have to consider our systems as a whole. And this looks like whether we are in urban planning and looking at designing and updating or upgrading city neighborhoods or local settlements. This can be applied to a product design. This can be applied to packaging design. So the concept itself can be applied at multiple different scales. But what it means is that we have to consider and reconsider our choices at every step. So, for me, what I find when engaging in such topics is that I need to redefine my relationship with our material resources. And that is more going to be my focus because that's where I've been working largely, is in our material resources. So, redefining our relationship with them in terms of how we extract, how we use, and how we produce. It's also redefining our relationship with people and with our communities, as Katerina emphasized. And we're very much aligned here. So we emphasize as Green Cape and as the Secretariat for the South African Plastics Pact, we emphasize people inclusive design in a circular economy. So we can approach changing systems in many different ways, but we need to, within our country, think of at every step of the way, how are we including the potential for greater income opportunities within our economic system? So an excellent example in the packaging space is that in Europe, near-infrared sorting and automated sorting processes in MRFs is the norm. Whereas in South Africa, we actually largely hand sort with some sort of mechanized support sometimes with a conveyor belt. And that, if you think of the inclusivity there, that is including job opportunities at a low skills level, a low skills barrier, and there's training within the system. So what we'd love to see, and we're already seeing, is further skills development and growth within that potential career path. But it's a low barrier to entry, could potentially supply many, many more jobs than what we currently have. So we need to think inclusive design. So we advocate for near infrared sorting more at the recycler level, where they can improve the quality of their materials. So we need to rethink our relationship with resources and rethink our relationship with people and communities. But we also need to rethink our relationship with our financial and economic systems. Often the way when we put products on the market, we're thinking over value in a very short time scale. So if I'm putting a consumer product, say I'm putting a new brand of ice cream onto the market, I'm just thinking about the value for my company as in the retail setting. So in the product design, in that process. But what about the sustained future value that we need to see in our economies? And what we're already seeing is the impacts of our largely linear economies on our environmental and our socioeconomic environments globally. So those impacts are becoming evident. And what we would like to emphasize today is that in a circular economy, we're thinking and looking at sustained future value in business, as well as many other different spheres. So if we are using renewable resources so that our resource extraction is not robbing our future selves even, because we're seeing the impacts of our resource use. Also, we're not robbing future generations of their access to resources. And we're keeping resources in circulation for as long as possible. That has increased income generation opportunities within that cycle. So if we're planning in that way, we're building in resilience and we're building in sustained future value, which is something we'd like to highlight. I'm not going to get to all my examples, Katerina, but I think what I'd like to emphasize is that when we think of a circular economy, as Katerina mentioned, often the conversation is focused on a waste economy or a recycling economy. What that means is that there has been very little focus on raw material extraction, the manufacture and production, so the material choices, the design, but rather what we've heard from some raw material producers, packaging manufacturers, brands, and retail, and I'm talking within the plastic packaging space because that is my most recent experience. And what we find is that many have asked, why can't waste management simply handle my product? But what we see is the brand owners and retailers, or those putting the materials on the market, are not considering the system as a whole. They're not considering and designing their products and their packaging, some of them, for the end phase, for the collection and the recycling. So in many ways, they might literally be designing for landfill or designing to be littered in some cases. And what we see globally, there is no economy globally, no matter how developed, where we've been able to not look at the upstream, to put whatever material choice, whatever product onto the market without thought of the downstream. There's no economy globally where we've been able to effectively cycle anything that gets placed on the market and everything that gets placed on the market in our economies. And I think that's very important to emphasize, because what we find is producers saying collectors are cherry picking. They're not picking my material because they're picking the highest value. But if we look at the value of your material, say as a producer that you've put on the market, on the streets, that literally needs to have value for the second half of its life to then enter the next iteration of its life. So we cannot, gone are the days where we can design simply to get products and packaging to the consumer. So I think that's a very important point. And what we need to emphasize is more the up and the midstream, material selection, material design, such that it has the greatest chance of circularity. So a focus on waste management and recycling can almost be a smoke and mirrors attempt to take the focus and the highlight off our unreasonable resource use and our design. And that's something our Plastics Pact members are emphasizing and working hard to change the system, that they're rethinking their choices right from the upstream, right from the product design and right from the packaging material choice. and the packaging design phase. So, Katerina, I think I said a few more words than I was hoping to. So I'm going to leave it there because we want discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kirsten, and sharing your insight as well around the SA Plastics Pact. I've seen it grown and it's amazing, I think, what the members are doing, and it's pushing the needle. So thank you so much for your insights. And I think now, or what Kirsten also said is it is still developing. And I think what sometimes makes us a very uncomfortable journey as well is that we're still figuring things out and that we're still adapting while we are going. So building the aeroplane while we fly. I think now I can open the floor for questions for the participants that are online. And I would ask you to just quickly say your first name, introduce yourself, which organization you're from, and then ask your question, please. Everyone's scared, tired.
Kat, should I maybe answer Kevin's
Oh
comments?
yeah, I
Okay.
saw that. Sorry, I just didn't read that comment. Yes, please do so, Kirsten. That's great.
Thanks. And thanks, Kevin. So agreed in terms of, so as we've emphasized, we need to rethink and relook at renewable resources, that we are not depleting finite resources that is robbing ourselves and future generations of resource use, and it's affecting our livelihoods and our well-being into the future. So we definitely need to disconnect there. So in terms of PT actually is one of the more resilient polymers in terms of circulation. So there is a recent study from the University of Stellenbosch, and I think it's around 6 or 7 times that we can see recycling of PET within the economy before the polymer starts breaking down, and we need to get to rebuilding of polymer in a more chemical recycling approach. Other polymers, some of the polyethylenes and the polypropylene tends to have fewer cycles, but also we remember that there's always a percentage of virgin plastic in the current new products. And again, so we were having a conversation offline just before this and talking around globally the need for degrowth. But what we would also emphasize is that in developing country settings, for example, if you take our GDP and, for example, GDP of the UK, we would have to grow a number of times, and UK might have to halve for us to then be at parity. So I think it's 3 or 4 times our GDP, and you halve UK, and we'll be at parity in terms of GDP. So often the north-south disconnect is quite huge there in terms of the degrowth conversation. So that's a bit of a rabbit hole that I went down there. But we need to grow our economy to include more jobs so that people can have a dignified lifestyle and have food on the table. So I think that's quite critical in the north-south discussion. So just in terms of the plastics, there is a percentage post-consumer recycled content inclusion. So at the moment, there's very few products that will be 100% recycled. There are some good examples, but we will get the virgin plastic then improving the properties of the plastic as a whole because you're dosing in the recycled content. But completely agreed, we need to move towards renewable resources, and whether that looks like there's a lot of discussion, a lot of development as well, whether that looks like a true biomaterial that will break down to non-toxic components. And then there's also developments in bio-based sources for the traditional plastic polymers. But then we do also need to show that we need to effectively handle the effects of the plastics we place on the market as well. So there's a lot of questions and discussion here. Okay, I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think, you can just highlight as well how complex the discussion is and how complex it is to consider the entire life cycle. I mean, we're just speaking about plastics, right? It's one plastics in the packaging sector, but obviously plastics are used in textiles, but we are also speaking about other economic sectors that are quite tricky to, I think, understand and unpack the complexity around it and then to apply those circularity principles based on the current system that we have in place, right? A lot has also to do with how we change behavior change, but it's also around leadership and how we make decisions and also finance available for those interventions. I'm going to jump to Susan. Susan, I think you have your hand up. If you can maybe just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for giving this opportunity, and I'm so happy to be part of this webinar. I have two questions which I want to check. Circular economy, it's more about the three pillars, which waste is the first component. But I'm also looking at your baby diapers. Where do we fit it in this circular economy? And if we want to create more jobs, can't we also look at that, because it's a serious challenge that we have? And maybe the last question, I'll pose it to Christine from Green Cape. Do you have programs where you assist SMMEs? We are based in Toyando. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. We are based in Toyando, and there's a big opportunity that we want to tap into. But we are seeing big companies getting into the market, leaving the communities struggling, unemployed, yet there is a potential that is being tapped into. So we just want to check if they do have some programs where they can capacitate small companies like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks, Susan, for all your questions. I think maybe I can quickly answer, and Kirsten, I'm sure you can pitch in around baby diapers as well. So the first pillar, you're quite right. You've picked it up very well, that it's eliminating waste and pollution. And I think we do still need to recognize that in a lot of economies, we still need to get our waste system right? But I think what Kirsten said is, just because we get the waste system right doesn't mean we actually tackle all the challenges which comes with a lot of the consumptions. So I think that is something as well. Maybe we have to think of for ourselves as well, that we put the pillar as the second pillar down. But I do think in general, waste or integrated waste management is still key, especially looking in the South African context, where we still have a lot of communities that don't actually receive proper waste management. I think this leads quite nicely into the baby diaper discussion, or any hygienic products that we see that are unfortunately being disposed of in a way that communities have to, because there is no other way to do so. I think if you're very much interested in baby diapers, the Saatchi Chair for Waste and Societies, they have done some interesting research around it, which is led by Professor Rini Schenk at the University of the Western Cape. There have been attempts to also think around reusable diapers again, and how this can be done, which has been so far proven to be quite tricky. But there have been pilots trying to do that, because obviously you need then water as a resource as well to be able to take care of the reusable diapers, and to actually make it affordable and accessible. So I think that this is something, the key components that we need to speak about that. I think, Kirsten, I can give that over to you as well, if you want to comment on that as well, and around the assistance for SMEs.
Okay, thanks, Katerina, and thanks, Susan. So agreed. And I think also in terms of waste management, as Katerina said, we need to rethink what we're putting into our economy, and rethink what will then end up in a waste management cycle. So that's very critical there. So what we currently see with baby diapers is, clearly we're not looking to slightly tweak a system that we can then be able to solve whole scale. That is very unlikely. That looks like a system redesign. And I want to point out Suzanne Karsh's comment in the chat, that we're also not looking to just simply a material replacement, that we actually, in a system redesign, there are different models that we need. And as Katerina referenced, in terms of reusable nappies, a reworking of a model is very difficult. So it's something that was common and was the norm for many, many, many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. We didn't have such disposable nappies, and yet now to rework the system and make it in a way in which we see behavior change and uptake is very, very important. So, for example, reuse refill is another system change that we need to work on. And I'd love further discussions around that, because there's a number of different elements that we're facing with instituting models such as that, but some excellent work that has been done around the world, and some very strong, great case studies and learnings from developing contexts such as ourselves. So I think that's a really exciting conversation, which I'd love to have further. Susan, please give me your email address. We're running a Green Pitch Challenge. So we supply information in terms of the landscape, in terms of different circular economy and green economy spaces. So within materials, water, agri, green skills, we have a green finance team and energy. And we currently have a Green Pitch Challenge, which has been advertised, where SMMEs can apply and they enter a challenge, and there's support provided in terms of the pitching, and you get the opportunity to pitch to a number of different investors. So we are doing that. And then within our network, we link up also to accelerators and those who work more closely with SMMEs as they develop going forward. So I can definitely send that on to you if you're interested.
I think great. Thank you, Kirsten. Maybe what we could also do is to share that link in the email that goes out to all the participants afterwards, so that we share the challenge. Maybe also just to mention, we are linked to Fitola, which is also accelerating SMEs. So that's maybe another option to look into. And we're really trying to understand the ecosystem within South Africa, especially around funding mechanism, because this is not only a challenge, it is still a challenge in the global north, but it is an extreme challenge in the global south that we bump our heads against constantly. So we do need to tackle that. I think, Jaishila, I saw your hand up. I'm not sure if you want to do do one last comment. Otherwise, I would wrap up because we are going to be done within 2 minutes, or if your question was already answered.
Hi, everyone. This is Jaishila Rajput from Toma Now. Thanks so much. The reason I lowered my hand is because I realized we were running out of time. But I do actually want to place one thing on the table. I really love the conversation. I love that we're having these kinds of engagements, and I couldn't agree more with the description that Kirsten has given us. One of the things that I did want to emphasize is the fact that it's not, the responsibility just does not lie just in one corner, that we need to actually look across the value chain. And I actually wanted to use this opportunity to maybe tap in on some of Kirsten's experience, especially with the role and responsibility of municipalities. Right now, there's so much emphasis on brand owners, on consumers, on collecting things, et cetera, and I wanted, because I know that there's a lack of some clarity, especially when it comes to regulations like extended producer responsibility, that municipalities can feel almost like they're caught out in the middle somewhere. And I really wanted to get some opinions on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaishila. I think very valuable comment. Kirsten, maybe I can quickly give it over to you around the EPR and municipalities, and then I'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Katerina, and thanks, Jaishila. Definitely agreed. There is still quite a bit of confusion around where the responsibilities lie from producers as well as municipalities. So as we know with the EPR legislation, the producers have responsibility for their own products at end of life, yet municipalities are held responsible for general waste collection, but also waste minimization and diversion under the National Waste Management Strategy. We actually did an interesting project funded by the Alliance to End Plastic Waste in the city of Johannesburg with City of Johannesburg and Pick It Up and SAPRO and JG Africa and ourselves and the African Reclaimers Organization, to your point that no one sector or organization has responsibility here. And we employed a municipal legal expert to look at what are the options in the interpretation of the EPR legislation, as well as the National Waste Management Strategy, with then reference also to municipal regulations. And how can we get the PROs were also very much involved in that discussion. So how can we get PROs, municipality, the formal recycling industry and informal sector, because all are referenced obviously within the EPR legislation and the waste legislation. How can we effectively form partnerships? So to my mind, there's still a lot of discussion. I know Salga was also developing a paper looking at that particular issue, and particularly re-looking at where some municipalities make general waste or waste on the curbside, whether it be general waste or recyclable waste, make it that it's owned by the municipality. So in terms of municipal legislation, it becomes a municipal asset, which then makes it very difficult to unlock that asset and release it into the private sector. So what we tried to do within Joburg, and we started something of a process, was say, we've got all these actors in the room, all have different strengths in terms of their particular organization type, but also different strengths based on their location. So City of Joburg and Pick It Up have possibly, well, they'll have maybe different skill sets or different capacity to a very small rural municipality, for example. So how do we then how do we get the same players around, but where can we add strength to the space so that we all achieve the mutual goals and aims and actually the mutual responsibilities? So I think there's a strong case to be made that responsibility, as you said, doesn't lie with any one sector, but there needs to be a mutual responsibility. We don't want to see municipalities stepping back and say, well, it's producers' problem. They're the owners of this material. They put it on the market. And they shouldn't be able to do that in terms of our constitution. And again, we don't want to have producers requiring that municipalities must shoulder the burden for all the products that they put on the market. So it's a very interesting developing conversation. I haven't been as close to it recently, but I know it is something the PRO Alliance is also working on, to have a closer collaboration, particularly in the waste management side of their operations. So we hope to see more movement on that then, but very good point.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much, Kirsten. I think that's maybe leading us also to having a follow-up topic around maybe EPR, how we include municipalities. We are also currently looking at developing some kind of masterclass for public officials to take circularity and kind of systems thinking forward. So this is where we are also then linking up with Green Cape again to see what initiatives they have done to really see what we can do together. We have created a WhatsApp update channel. Don't worry, we're not going to spam you with any information. It's just basically like the South African presidency, where you're going to be informed with circular economy news around the country and news that might be interesting to the country. We have a LinkedIn page. Please join us as a member on our Circular South Africa website. It's very straightforward. We also have a knowledge hub there because we're really trying to pull everyone together, and organizations can also sign up as a partner. By the end of the webinar, I obviously just want to thank my team, Marie, Christo, and Mark, and obviously Kirsten for joining today and for making this possible, and everyone else who joined today. And please just wait until the webinar is done, because we have 3 questions just to ask for your feedback around the lunch club, and to see if we are also taking this medium forward to have this open kind of conversation, because we all know you're very busy. So with that, thank you so much, and then looking forward to further engagements.